Hasselblad here, welcome back to the channel, and this is the video from the OnePlus 9 Pro, and I think this is a really big deal because OnePlus themselves have really been hyping up the performance of the cameras on the OnePlus 9 Pro and playing up their partnership with camera manufacturer Hasselblad, who co-developed these cameras with them. And I think most would agree that OnePlus has always had some really great phones, and the camera aspect and the camera performance is probably the last frontier for them to conquer in their smartphones. They've got really good hardware, they've always had really good performance, great software, pretty good battery life, just all around good phones, but the camera software has seemingly held them back from being viewed in the eyes of manufacturers like Apple or Samsung. And this year, OnePlus has priced their phone at over $1,000 for this 9 Pro. And so if the camera performance can really match the performance of an Apple, Samsung, the top phones from Xiaomi or Huawei, I think most would agree that maybe OnePlus has actually finally arrived in the smartphone game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a bunch of photos and videos in both good and low light conditions. And this is going to be with the first of the 2 camera updates that OnePlus has pushed out already for this phone. I've taken all the photos and videos after I got the first update, then the second update hit, so I'll be doing more camera comparisons with that latest update in future videos. So let me know what phones you want to see this phone compared to. But again, like I said, all the photos and videos that you're about to see were taken after the first camera update. So take a look, let me know what you think, and I'll come back at the end and share my thoughts with you. And one more thing before we get to the photos and videos, this is the video portrait mode on the OnePlus Pro rear cameras. So you just saw the 4K 30 frames per second video from the rear main camera. This is now the portrait video mode, so there should be some amount of background blur. I just want to see how this artificial bokeh effect works here. And this is going to be limited to 1080p recording, so that's the resolution that you're seeing here. But again, this is the video portrait mode of the OnePlus 9 Pro. Let me know how you think this is performing. Do you see kind of any kind of background blur? Let me know what you think. And with that, now let's get to the photos and videos. Hey everyone, so I'm out in the park testing the video on the OnePlus 9 Pro, and we're just about over an hour away from sunset, so there's going to be a good amount of sun glare coming out of my left, and you might start to see some of that in here, and it's pretty tough lighting conditions coming from that side, so if you see any kind of lens flare glare, that's what that is. But otherwise, this is my usual testing place in the park, and so I figured it'd be a good place to give you some footage of these video cameras here on the OnePlus 9 Pro. If you see my camera comparisons, this should be a familiar scene, and you should be pretty familiar with what other phones look like here in this exact setting. And so this is the ultra wide angle lens, and what's nice is that you can actually switch between the lenses while recording. I like phones that can do that. So here's the main lens here, and this is what that looks like here, and what the field of view looks like compared to that ultra wide angle camera here. And actually, at least from what I see in the viewfinder, the footage isn't looking too bad here actually, and looks pretty good. There's a decent amount of shadow in those trees, and the footage is, at least from the viewfinder, is lifting those shadows up. And we'll go ahead and pan over here to the right, and I can test zoom here on that cell tower. So here is the telephoto lens at 2x zoom there, and we can move in a little bit and actually go 5x. And I think this has the audio feature where the more I zoom in on the subject, it's going to try to lock in the audio on that subject, so my voice could be getting softer here. But that's 5x digital zoom there. We can move into about a 10x digital zoom, and again in the viewfinder it's looking pretty stable but fairly grainy here. And let's go ahead and move into, that's the max zoom, so 10x max zoom there. This is 4K 30 frames per second. I'll go ahead and back it out to the 1x. We'll test autofocus here on the post. So there we go. You can see a lot of that strong sunlight here, which might be making it a little bit harder, but it is focusing and focusing away pretty well here. And one more time. It's not too bad on the autofocus there. And let's go ahead and walk down the stairs to test stabilization here. And we'll see how this is looking, but you can see that glare coming out from the left with that strong sun. But I'll go ahead, stop here, pan up, and pan around into the sun to see how the exposure handles that.
That's how I got that heat, let's go.
Alright, so as I walk around out here just snapping some photos and taking a look at the pictures in real time, I actually think they look pretty good, and I'm not really disappointed yet, but that could change as I have time to take them off the phone, look at them on the computer, do more camera comparisons. But just initial impressions using the phone and taking a look at the pictures in real time, it looks pretty good. There's a good amount of detail, especially my dog's fur. There's not too much oversaturation going on in the colors. That's where you lose a lot of details in the photos, especially in colorful photos like with the flowers and the petal details. And so overall first impressions, pretty good. And I just wish you could record 4K video from the front-facing camera. You're limited to 1080p, but you can do 1080p 60. But on a phone like this, you really should be able to record 4K from the front-facing camera. So here's a low light video test on the OnePlus 9 Pro at 4K 30 frames per second, starting out with the ultra wide angle lens. And I'm just hand holding this right now in front of me and panning around so you can see what this looks like here on the ultra wide. And what's nice is you can actually switch between the lenses while recording. So this is the main lens here, and that's what that looks like. It's not flaring out that bright light too badly, but maybe a little bit more than some other phones. And I can go all the way into the telephoto. So that's 2x on the telephoto. And I'll pan around so you can see what that looks like here. And I'll move it back out, and I'll go ahead and pan this way and start walking. And we'll test stabilization. So this is my usual low light test. I usually like to start out with a well lit area, and let's move over to a much darker area to see how it handles this light transition, as well as what the stabilization looks like. And at least in the viewfinder, the video is looking pretty good for being 4K. Usually 4K is much darker in low light, and as you're around this corner, it's going to get really dark. But at least in the viewfinder, it's trying to brighten up the scene a bit. There is some noise. It's not as bad or as noisy as maybe some other phones, but that's going to be natural when it tries to brighten up what everything looks like here. And I'll go ahead and pan up into the dark night sky. You can see a plane actually flying above me right now as that moves across the sky, and that's not too bad there. And I'll go ahead and pan over here to the left where there's a little bit more light down this alley, so you can see what that looks like here in 4K. Perfect, so here's a video test on the OnePlus 9 Pro in its Nightscape mode. So this is limited to 1080p 30 frames per second. But this is what Nightscape mode here video looks like on the OnePlus 9 Pro. I'll pan around like I did in the 4K. You can see how that light looks. Of course, it's going to blow that out. And we'll pan around here. And we'll start walking to test stabilization in this mode. But I'm also curious to see how Nightscape performs in that much darker area over there and how bright it keeps everything. So let me know what you think so far about Nightscape and how this is performing. The greens look pretty ultra green here, at least in the viewfinder, so I'm curious to see what this footage looks like once I take it off the phone. But as you round this corner here into that really dark area, it definitely is brightening things up a lot, and probably at the expense of a lot of noise in the sky there. But this is definitely really bright compared to how dark it is out here right now. And I'll go ahead and pan up into that pretty dark night sky, and yeah, you can see a ton of noise out there. But this is definitely good for if you're in a really dark area. You just really want to be able to see what you're shooting versus not being able to see anything at all. So here's a quick look at Nightscape here on the OnePlus 9 Pro. However, as I keep testing out these cameras, my first impressions still haven't really changed. I still think the cameras are actually quite good, and I haven't really seen anything obvious to make me believe that they won't continue to be good and only improve over time with these updates. And so really I hope that OnePlus isn't falling the way of some other brands and phones where they get attached to some stereotypes and people just don't want to go back and revisit or look at those initial observations and revisit them to maybe change their opinions as these products evolve over time. So hopefully OnePlus doesn't fall victim to LG and their boot loop issues, or to HTC and that whole waste of space. I really hope that people have an open mind when they start looking at these cameras. So far I don't have any reason to believe that they won't continue to be good, and that opinion could change over time obviously as I do more camera comparisons and I continue to test the cameras. There may be things that I find later, but for now, initial impressions, really not too bad, even here in some low light. Front facing camera is just a little bit too cropped in for my taste, but overall photos and videos aren't looking too bad and actually are quite good. So let's go ahead and close this video out. Hey everyone, so now you've seen all the photos and videos for yourself. What do you think? Do you think OnePlus's partnership with Hasselblad has paid off here and that their cameras can now compete with the best of Apple, Samsung, Huawei, and the like? Or do you still think they have a long way to go here? Leave a comment down below and let me know. But personally, I think the photos and videos came out quite good. They actually had a lot more detail than I was expecting, and the colors are looking pretty neutral. They're not looking really boosted or oversaturated. And one way to tell is usually when I take pictures of those flowers, the vibrancy of the color, if you boost those colors, you're going to lose a lot of detail in the petals, and that wasn't the case here with the OnePlus photos. And even low light performance was pretty respectable. I didn't see anything too bad about them. I shoot those same photos and videos in those same low light situations for all my camera comparisons, so I know how other phones perform. And the OnePlus, to my eye, seemingly wasn't really performing any worse than a lot of those phones. It doesn't get as bright in its night mode, but that could be a good thing depending on how you want to see your low light photos. Some people want to see it more true to life, a little bit darker, but not overly dark to where I can't see my subject. I think that's kind of where OnePlus is. They're kind of in the middle ground of that low light performance. It's not super bright, but it's also not really dark. You can still see what you're shooting. And a lot of those photos were done in some pretty dark situations. So I think even low light performance isn't really looking too bad here. And as far as video in the daytime and in good lighting conditions, like you saw in the beginning of this video, I thought that actually looked pretty good. And the portrait video actually looked really sharp. It didn't have an intense background blur, but it did look really sharp and a lot better than I was expecting. If anything, maybe the front-facing camera is a little bit disappointing. The photos look okay, but the video, at least what I'm seeing here in the viewfinder, isn't as good. I thought the rear-facing video was a lot better. This is certainly passable, but I do have a lot of good lighting around me. But either way, let me know what you think about how all the photos and videos turned out. My first impressions after the first camera update, actually not too bad here. And I don't think OnePlus has done anything to really hurt themselves. But I've installed the second camera update that they've released. I'll be doing a bunch of camera comparisons over the weekend and in the next coming weeks. So do let me know what phones you want to see in those comparisons. But again, leave a comment down below with your thoughts. And as always, thanks for watching.